Thank you so much. I want to thank all of the Reverend Fathers and all of the organizers of this conference. I'm very humbled and honored to participate in this. St. Justin Popovich said that the building of the European Tower of Babel took 10 centuries, and it is our destiny to behold the tragic vision. Lo, they have built an enormous zero. End quote. Story is one of the most indestructible things in the world for the simple reason that the logic inherent in a great story transcends the ideological fits of mankind. Story exists in the fabric of our very being. In the deepest recesses of our soul, we do not invent reality, we discover it. We are born into it. We are not the gods of story, but heirs of an immortal author. We live in a storied universe. But what happens to man when he has lost his story? He clings to momentary illusions, fantasies, and utopias. Lost amidst the vast, cold, meaningless cosmos, he invents artificial realities in his mind, which do not correspond with the history or nature of his ancestors. The crisis of our civilization stems from the abandonment and repudiation of the divine narrative in favor of hyper-individualism, moral relativism, and ontological subjectivism. Nihilists and postmodernists deface and disfigure the nature of story. In their useless dream to be free from limitations, they enslave themselves to chaos, spiraling towards the abyss. Their stories do not speak to a conclusion, but rather to non-being, in other words, to nothingness. Their portraits do not embody an idea, but the negation of ideas having any objective meaning or value. There is no face looking back at us, formlessness imposed on swirling chaos. There is no shape or visage. They are not actually making anything, but attempting to unmake the logos, the word embodying the divine thought of God in man. They are unwilling to expose themselves to the danger of beauty and holiness. Without the divine narrative, man slowly goes mad and begins to destroy himself. We see this in the final iconoclasm of the cults of transgenderism and transhumanism. This time, however, it is not icons made of paint and wood being destroyed, but living men and women, boys and girls made in the image of God. Have we no mental hierarchy left in us to evaluate different levels of authenticity in the human experience? Have we no criterion beyond the subjective individual from which to challenge anti-human ideologies? Are we not to include the blood of history into our analysis? Are we to equate the very foundations of our civilization, the core traditions, beliefs, and revelations upon which all of our laws, ethics, discourse, human relations, and reality itself is based? Are we to equate all of this with subjective impulse? The reality of a biological male being a man and a biological female being a woman is not even a belief. It is reality. And if we are willing to seriously call this into question, we have no basis upon which to argue or discuss anything anymore, for reality itself has been obliterated. If nothing is self-evident, we cannot have a civilization. I believe we have entered the final iconoclasm. The English philosopher Roger Scruton, in The Soul of the World, has this to say, quote, "The unity of the self-conscious subject is not the conclusion of any inquiry, but the presupposition of all inquiries. The unity of consciousness transcends all argument, since it is the premise without which argument makes no sense." And like Scruton's insight about self-consciousness, the reality of biological sex has a similar feature. It is not the conclusion of any inquiry, but a presupposition to all other inquiries about what it means to be a man or a woman. This is something humanity in our common history knows. It is a reality so fundamental that it transcends every nuanced religious belief throughout the ages. Are we expected to crucify truth in the name of tolerance? This seemingly limitless tolerance has paved the way for society to accept the existential threats of artificial intelligence and transhumanism. We are approaching an abyss. Over the last century, humanity has suffered 2 world wars and hundreds of millions of tragic deaths. In the wake of our collective trauma, we have been further indoctrinated, propagandized, and addicted to sensual stimulus. It is a perfect storm of shock, chaos, and erasure, a sort of reprogramming, if you will. In 1951, General Douglas MacArthur warned Americans that our moral, theological, and spiritual vision must not be abandoned in the face of unparalleled advancements in technology. Quote, we have had our last chance. If we will not devise some greater and more equitable system, Armageddon will be at our door. The problem basically is theological and involves a spiritual recrudescence and improvement of human character that will synchronize with our almost matchless advances in science, art, literature, and all material and cultural developments of the past 2,000 years. It must be of the Spirit if we are to save the flesh. End quote. Indeed, the problem is theological and spiritual. In a lecture on the reticular activating system, Marc-André Alexander reveals that whatever is repeated is stored. Where? In your subconscious, in your memory, in your very being. This is why the divine liturgy repeats itself so much. Do this in remembrance of me, our Lord commanded. The divine narrative is being stored in us, and this storing is so powerful, even those suffering from dementia who fail to recognize their own spouse or children can recite the hymns from the divine liturgy. It has been stored in a place within them that is nearly indestructible. Yes, the divine liturgy has its purpose in the world. But this same mysterious faculty within the soul has been co-opted by demonic forces with the intent of storing toxic waste within human beings. Whatever is repeated is stored. So they repeat their propaganda hundreds of thousands of times until it is simply stored within. And then it takes a miracle of grace to undo a lifetime of lies. It must be of the Spirit if we are to save the flesh. European man has come to experience a fateful vertigo, St. Justin Popovich says. He took the Superman to the top of his Tower of Babel to be the crown of his edifice, but the Superman went mad just below the top and plunged down from the tower. It fell with him, shattered by wars and revolutions. If we remain a storyless people, we will die. As Solomon wrote, where there is no vision, the people perish. St. Justin Popovich continues his prophetic lament by saying, quote, European culture has deprived man of his soul. It has made him artificial and mechanical. It is like a monstrous machine that devours men and makes them into things. The end result is touchingly sad and movingly tragic. Man, a soulless thing among soulless things. End quote. The elites of the world, those who belong to a clandestine fifth column, do not want us to know who we are. They do not want us to know our history. That is why the lives of the saints have been ignored for centuries. We have been assaulted with a barrage of propaganda about so-called progress. There are thousands of artificial identities we could assume, but there is only one authentic identity. And like Christ in the wilderness, the poets of the last age, when confronted with the lies of the evil one, must reply, it is written. There is an eternal story. It has an author, and I am part of his poem. We must be taught the ancient story Artists, musicians, painters, writers, filmmakers must rise up and remind civilization of the cosmic drama of Jesus Christ for the salvation of the world. Artists do have a role to play in this apocalyptic drama. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was a man who understood this and articulated it with apocalyptic clarity. In his Nobel lecture, he said the following: "We shall be told, what can literature do in the face of a remorseless assault of open violence? But let us not forget that violence does not and cannot exist by itself. It is invariably intertwined with the lie. The simple act of an ordinary brave man is not to participate in lies, not to support false actions. His rule, let that come into the world. Let it even reign supreme, only not through me. But it is within the power of writers and artists to do much more, to defeat the lie. For in the struggle with lies, art has always triumphed and shall always triumph. Visibly, irrefutably for all, lies can prevail against much in this world, but never against art. One word of truth shall outweigh the whole world." In the final analysis, the battle against transhumanism is the battle for the soul of humanity. There is no greater gift than the gift of existence, not just any existence, like a tree or a plant or even a bird or a lion, but self-conscious existence, the kind unique to man and woman. This is the gift above all gifts, the magnitude of which we are in the process of either apprehending or attempting to deny throughout the drama of our lives. The words of Jesus Christ, "To whom much is given, much is required," ought to be reflected upon specifically in the realm of self-conscious existence. Soren Kierkegaard expressed it this way: "To have a self, to be a self, is the greatest, the infinite concession that has been granted a human being, but it is also eternity's requirement of him." Modern man does not see his existence as a gift or a responsibility. Life is something he takes for granted. The gift-responsibility equation is absent from his view, and therefore he is a poor shadow of what he was created to be. He is a shallow, self-reverential, indignant, pain-avoiding, pleasure-seeking slave. The most poignant and devastating question ever asked in the history of the world came from the mouth of the God-man, Jesus Christ. "For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul?" In other words, his very self. What kind of value does Christ place on one's soul, on one's very self? Everything. In this light, we come to see that death is not the greatest tragedy. Suffering is not the greatest tragedy. No, rather, losing the divine gift of one's self. This is the only tragedy. You may gain the whole world, but if you lose your soul, if at the end you do not know yourself as you exist in relation to God, then you have lost everything. Indeed, everything. Everything. To such a soul, the Lord will say at the end, "I never knew you, depart from me." And indeed, such a soul will say to itself, "I never knew you." This is the entire purpose of the cosmic drama, to become oneself in the image and likeness of God. Heaven and hell exist within this drama, within this divine potential. Will I take up the cross of existence? Will I accept the responsibility inherent within the divine gift of self-consciousness? When I finally meet God and at the same moment finally meet myself, will I be known by him and myself? To accept the cross of existence is to accept that the wages of sin is death, that I owe God a death. It is not an injustice, but for those who believe, it is also not the end. This is where the war is waged. This is where the battle is fought from birth to death. This is the inexpressible gift and harrowing burden of being human, possessing the divine, the potential to become partakers of the divine nature. The revelation of Jesus Christ dignifies man by calling him upward into union with the divine, not merely in
Sorry, you
words,
have
but in
1 minute
reality.
more.
It is an ontological revolution. Posthumanism and transhumanism seeks man's deification through godless autonomous means, and in the end, it will bring about man's annihilation. Much like the lie of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, artificial intelligence and transhumanism offers the ancient temptation to become a god without the grace of God, to build a tower that reaches the heavens. It is through the sacred acts of remembering, recovering, and returning to the divine narrative that we will gain the courage to live through the third act of history. We are by nature poetic beings made in the image of the poet word. Our roots must go deep into the ancient past and transcend the spirit of the age if we are to withstand the storms of our postmodern world, if we are to resist the final iconoclasm. For it is only here, in the presence of the God-man, Jesus Christ, that our lives find meaning and fulfillment strong enough to withstand the despair and nihilism of this present darkness.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.